Good afternoon. You're in tune to Common Talk. I'm your host, J Jack, here on IntellectualRadio.com. Hope you're having a great day. The sun is shining finally. All the rain seems to have moved on. We just want to keep in mind our prayers and thoughts are with those who lost their lives and also had property damage and suffered some other damages or other issues as it relates to the weather. We keep you lifted up and we hope that all is well and keep your head up and hopefully things will proceed to be better. Want to talk today, and we talked about the Olympics last week, which was a very interesting topic. We got to talk about some of the folks that were doing their thing, and very proud of each and every one of those that we discussed. But we want to kind of flip the script and go into a whole different arena. We want to talk about the violence that's plaguing our Chicagoland area. Although there's violence throughout the nation, Chicago has really been under the microscope because of all the recent acts of violence and the crimes and things that are occurring in the inner city. So I'm just going to rattle off a couple of things that were in the headlines. Southside Blaze kills three. It's suspicious and under investigation in the 8100 block of South Essex. Lakeview crime is increasing, yet data shows it is not as high as it was a decade ago. That says something. We'll talk about that again. 8 dead, 49 wounded over a weekend. This was a couple of weekends ago. West Garfield Park shooting kills 22-year-old, 16-year-old boy man shot to death in Roseland. 66-year-old man stabbed to death in Rogers Park. 50-year-old man and 40-year-old woman shot in Avondale. Two shot in drive-by in University Village. 21-year-old man shot in Lincoln Square. 8-year-old girl shot in Austin. 35-year-old man shot to death in Gage Park. 21-year-old shot in Washington Heights. 14-year-old dies after being shot in Austin. 21-year-old man shot in the head in Ravenswood. 3 killed in Austin. 47-year-old man wounded in South Loop shooting. State trooper charged in Chinatown shooting. Well, not charged, but involved in a shooting. 2 wounded in Rogers Park shooting. 24-year-old found fatally shot in North Lawndale. 20-year-old shot to death in Logan Square. 37-year-old dies after being shot in North Lawndale. 2 people killed in shooting in Irving Park. 3 wounded in Inglewood shooting. 24-year-old wounded in Irving Park shooting. Man killed in Chatham. 24-year-old shot to death in Avalon Park. 100 arrests and gang raids over a couple of weekends ago. 6-year-old shot in West Pullman. 32-year-old shot in back of the yards. Then we go into talking about the issue where a young lady who was over on the south side of Chicago, Nakia Aldridge, who is the cousin of basketball great Dwayne Wade, was killed when she was walking with her baby in a stroller. She was not the target of the shooting, but she was an innocent bystander, innocent victim. And thank the Lord that the baby was not injured or was not involved in the shooting. Then we have college student Arshel Dennis III. He was son of a police officer, doing the right thing. Came back from college to visit his ailing mom, and look what happens. Then we got Abner Garcia, Army vet, gets killed in his car, drive-by shooting. Arson kills 7, including 3 children. And it was, we talked about it a minute ago, it was a suspicious arson. And then, of course, you got the Laquan McDonald thing, and officers were recommended to be fired. According to the Tribune, and I'm looking at some of their sources, since 2011, at least 166 people were under 17 were either shot or killed. At least 1,218 people in this age group. Not all shootings were as a result, or not all deaths were a result of shootings. I want to give you some statistics from the past few years. In 2006, so far, 207 shooting victims. We're talking about under 17. 25 assaults. 2015, 448 shooting victims, 27 resulted in homicides. And I should have said in 2006, 25 resulted in homicides. We're talking about just under 17. 2014, 285, 35 resulted in homicides. 2013, 166, 29 resulted in homicides. 2012, 259. Thank God no one under 17 was listed in my statistics as perishing. 2011, 51. No, again, nobody listed as dying as a result of that. A person is shot every 2 hours and 1 minute in Chicago. The murder rate, every 11 minutes and 54 seconds, someone is murdered. In August of 2016, it is the most violent month since October 1996. So far, at least 85 people have been murdered. Last year, 55 people murdered in August, per the state police data. In a total, 478 people have been murdered in Chicago so far this year. You look at New York, you look at LA, two of the largest cities in our country. They're about 4 times combined, 4 times as the size or the population of Chicago, yet Los Angeles and New York combined have a total of 393 murders in their respective states combined. That's again 4 times the population of Chicago. Letting violent offenders back on the streets. Superintendent Eddie Johnson is really talking about that quite often and quite verbal about his dismay about this. You got drug traffickers or guys that have non-violent offenses serving more time than guys who have violent offenses. What do? How do we combat these things? It's just a terrible statistic. And then we look at what can be done. Donald Trump made a statement a couple of weeks ago that, and I'm paraphrasing him now. He said that he could end all of this violence in a week. He said he could end this violence or these situations in Chicago in a week. And my challenge to candidate Trump is, if you really care about what happens, don't wait until you're elected to help. Help now. If you have the solution, which I highly doubt that he has, he has a tendency to have rhetoric and talk kind of off the cuff and talk about things just pulling out of the air and then later retracts them or makes the statement that he didn't say that or his intent was something different. But if someone has the answer, and if you really think that you can do that, even if it's wrong or erroneous, at least bring it to the table. People are dying. People are dying every day, and our young people are dying every day. I want to talk a little bit about some things, and I'm going to try to stick with some statistics, and then I'll give my point of view, and hopefully give some explanations of what can be done and what should be done and what needs to be done to combat or curtail these things that are occurring. That innocent lives, in a lot of cases, are being snuffed out just because of gang violence or territorial things or bragging rights or things of that nature. And a lot of times the innocent folks are the one that pay the price, and the guys who, or the intended persons, are the ones that go scot-free or are surviving. Police involved shootings. Let's go with this. In 2016, there were 6 police involved shootings and 11 wounded. In 2015, there were 9 police involved shootings and 16 wounded. Well, I'm going to go back because I meant to say in 2016, 6 killed and 11 wounded. 2015, 9 killed and 16 wounded. Now, again, we're talking about police involved shootings. In 2014, 17 killed, 28 wounded. 2013, 13 killed, 30 wounded. 2012, 8 killed, 49 wounded. 2011, 23 killed, 37 wounded. 2010, 13 killed, 33 wounded. And we'll end with 2009, 19 killed and 42 wounded. We can talk about the police involved shootings and things of that nature. But there's a disparity that if you look at the numbers, they're considerably low of the people that were actually killed by the police. Now, I'm not necessarily talking about the high profile things like the Laquan McDonald issue and the recent shooting of the young man, and I can't call his name, where the video cams that the officers are now required to wear on their equipment as part of their equipment just malfunctioned at the time where the actual shooting occurred. It was obviously working prior to the shooting, and then again, I believe after the shooting. And we found out that during the course of the shooting, it was either disengaged or it was malfunctioning. We don't know. Only the officers involved know the actual truth, and I'm sure down the line, the truth will come out if there is some kind of a suspect involvement or suspect interaction or things of that nature. Let's go to 2016 and look at, out of all the murders and all of the violent offenses that have occurred in the city of Chicago. And I'm getting these statistics from various websites, various media outlets. Some of it is from the Chicago Crime Commission and things of that nature. And just trying to put some kind of cap on this and put some kind of information out there so that folks know that there's some serious stuff going on. We're losing lives at an enormous rate. It is catastrophic to our communities. No one feels safe coming out of their homes. Children can't play in front of their homes. In some instances, they cannot even sit on their porch. Or in the case of a young girl who perished, I want to say maybe a month or so ago, she was doing what children do, sitting at home watching TV in the comfort and the security of her own home, and a bullet went through the window and struck the young lady and killed her. Where are we safe? Where are the children safe? What does it mean to have that security of home? It's kind of non-existing now. There are no safe havens. I was fortunate enough to take a group of children out to Camp Minnesota in southern Illinois, and these were children mostly from the inner city who had an opportunity to breathe some fresh air and enjoy the things that were core to just being a child: running, laughing, playing, swimming, riding bicycles, playing in the sun, playing kick baseball and things of that nature that they don't necessarily get an opportunity to do in the inner city because of the violence that occurs. You know, kids can't go anywhere without watching their back, and even if they watch their back, they're subject to get a stray bullet or get an unattended bullet that is meant for others to come their way. So we want to look at that. But I want to talk about some of the causes of death that have occurred within the course of 2016. Gunshots, 440 people. That's 90.3% of the deaths. Stabbing, 29. That's 6% of the deaths. Trauma, various trauma, where it may be a blunt trauma or some forcible trauma or some trauma that inflicts deadly consequences. Arson, and we saw recently that maybe that statistic is not included in these numbers. This was probably prior to August, but we just saw 7 people perish as a result of arson, and to find out that those fires were purposely set, I don't know, to inflict pain or to hurt someone or to make a point or to destroy property. In every instance, all of those things did occur. So arson, there were 5, that's 1%. It's a small percent, but it does occur. Assault, 3, 6%. Child abuse, which is always a red flag and a radar on our radar, was 0.4%. And again, I'm going back to arson. That should have been 0.6%, not 6%. And then auto-related deaths, that was 0.4%. Victims of crime by race. Now we look at the crime statistics and we look at what culture seems to be a perpetrator as well as victims of the numerous crimes that plague our cities, and it is unbalanced, to say the least, that people of color and people in minority communities, as well as impoverished communities or underserved communities, tend to be the ones that are victims of crime and perpetrators of crimes. We had a guest here a few weeks back, Mr. Skinner, who is a mentor with Just Because Mentoring, and he said something that would made so much sense about what's going on. We have to look at the diminishing social service programs that are out there, the things that youngsters and a lot of these crimes are being committed by youngsters. At a certain point, adults don't commit the majority of the crime. Now we see that the ages are going down. You know, there used to be a time where there was a certain age, 25 to 35, who were committing a great amount of crimes. Now we see that youngsters or youth under 17 are committing a great deal of crimes. We look at the incident that occurred with the young lady who was with her child, Miss Arnett, Nikita Aldridge, I'm sorry, who was murdered by two young men, or allegedly murdered by two brothers actually, that were after someone else. I guess it was a cab driver, Uber driver, or someone that was a transporter, and the young lady, Miss Aldridge, had happened to be in the line of fire and subsequently lost her life because of these youngsters or these young men going after someone. And we look at the fact that they had an extensive criminal background, violent offenses. They were actually both, I believe, incarcerated, and they were released and back into the public. And somehow, some way, they got a hold of a weapon and got involved in whatever activities they got involved in, and a life is lost. A child is going to grow up without her mother, and I believe she had other children. I believe she was a mother of four in total. So we got four children who are without their mother, and she was a young person. She was in her early to mid 30s. So that is such a waste. And I don't want to diminish the fact that she was a relative or cousin of Dwayne Wade, but the violence, the bullets have no names, they have no faces, they can strike anyone at any time. And the high profile cases tend to get the recognition, but they also get the information and the things that are put out so that people know these things. And we look at Rhyme Fest, and I'll go back, I'm jumping back and forth, but it was interesting. A former candidate for the Aldermanic race a number of years ago, but also a Grammy and I believe an Academy Award winning artist who got robbed on the south side of Chicago in the 7100 block of Cottage Grove near the police station over there. And he went to make a report, and he reported himself that he was treated very disrespectfully, and he was treated without compassion. He was not taken seriously. He was treated as if he was a suspect as opposed to being a victim of a crime. And he had the sense, or he had the quick thinking to record some of the interaction. He didn't get all of it because he said he only pulled his camera out after he was being disrespected and put in a position where he felt he had to have some evidence to prove that he was not being treated in a manner that he or anyone else deserves. And he made a point of saying it wasn't just about him, it was about any other victim that comes into the police office or the police station with a valid claim and need the police to act upon it, or at least have some empathy or some sympathy for the cause. He made a point, and he was in an interview on a program yesterday or the day before, I can't recall, where he said the police are kind of throwing their hands up. They're kind of giving up. They're kind of losing that sympathy or losing some of that vigor that they initially signed up for. Now you have older seasoned cops, and in the video it looks like the officer that initiated the interaction or the exchange was probably a veteran officer, and he said the officer was continuing to play Candy Crush or whatever the video game that they were involved in when he was trying to make a report. And They were very rude to him, and the sergeant came out and indeed was rude to him. And he has some of that stuff on tape. And he thought enough of it that he created a new song. You know, when you have those creative juices, you can do those things and come out and really, really put something down that's going to make an impact on folks. So hopefully this will be a teachable moment. I know we've overused in that cliche teachable moment. Everything now is a teachable moment. But hopefully this will be a teachable moment that reinvigorates or reignites the desire for our officers to definitely serve and protect and create an environment in the community that allows us to, as a whole, once again, respect their positions, but also appreciate and be able to have an interaction with them that's going to produce and garner some good results. So I want to talk about the race of our various victims during the past year. We look at the number of victims that we're still talking about violent crimes. So we're going to look at victims and we'll look at assailants. So out of the victims that we've had in the past years, 378 were Black, 66 of the assailants were Black, 79 of the victims were Hispanic, 20 of the assailants were Hispanic. White and other, there were 25 victims and 2 assailants. And that number, again, there's a plus minus factor in this. And I'm only reporting some information that I got through my research. Again, there may be some different numbers and some things that are out there that are counter to what I'm presenting today. And we just want to present something. And if nothing else, it gets us to thinking. It gets us to the point where we look and want to do our research and want to educate ourselves of what's going on, number one, in our communities as it relates to violence, as it relates to things of that nature. But also, we want to look at what we can do. And if we know who is affecting and how it's affecting us, and who's on both sides of the gun, or who's on both sides of the violence, or who's on both sides of the crime, we can look at it in a different manner and dictate the human factor in all of these. Also, we looked at the police as it relates to victims. There were no police victims in the data that I received, but there were 6 police assailants. And then there's always the unknown category, which is interesting. 6 unknown, but 386 assailants. That says volumes, that we don't know who these people were. We don't know where they come from. We don't have the information to even go after those individuals. So these are people that potentially have gotten away, because I believe if they don't know who they are and what they look like and where they come from, they don't know how to go get them. And so we look at 386 assailants. That's a very high number. Let's look at gender. We're going to look at gender, and we're going to look at the killed and the wounded. 445 males were killed. 2,147 males were wounded. We're talking about violence. Females, 43 were killed. 276 were wounded. And then there's, I don't have any statistics for the unknown. Let's take a quick break, and then we'll come back and we'll talk a little bit more about some of these statistics and some of the things that can be proposed, and go from there. We'll be back in a minute. You're listening to Common Talk here on IntellectualRadio.com. I'm your host, J. Jack. We'll be right back. Thank you. Welcome back to Common Talk here on IntellectualRadio.com. I'm your host, J Jack. Thank you for tuning in. We're talking about a serious subject, the violence that's plaguing Chicago area youth, Chicago area families, communities at large. And we were talking statistically, just looking at the numbers of things that are occurring as it relates to race and gender, cause of violent crimes, the numbers from various years and things of that nature. So we want to continue this, and we won't be long-winded, but we wanted to put some of this information out there just to get us to thinking and to get us to look at some resources that will allow us to know what's going on in our community, but not to put fear in your heart or fear in your head. We just want to make you aware of these things so that we can be armed with the correct information, or at least go and find this information. If this is not accurate to the best of your knowledge, then I would encourage you to go to various locations: Chicago Crime Commission, Chicago Police Department, the State Police, FBI, and any other internet or website that allows you to have access to that various information as it relates to your communities, because we need to know what's going on in our communities, and we need to be armed with the intellectual information that is going to allow us to put a stop or put an end to this senseless violence in the world. A lot of people are talking martial law. I don't know how I feel about that. Sometimes you want someone to intervene and put a halt to that, but then we become Beirut. We become some of the third world countries, the Middle East countries that are continually fighting, although they're fighting based on religious principles and religious thoughts and things of that nature. Are we getting to that point where, no one can come out of their house without fear of being shot down, or fear of violence, or fear of some kind of retaliation for something that they may or may not have known? You look at the internet today, and some instances where there's some beef between two people over the internet, where someone says something and then the other one takes offense or whatever, and then they subsequently get into a brawl, and then they take it into, outside of the web-based confrontation, into a physical and one-on-one confrontation. And we've seen it happen too many times in recent years, months, and days, where someone gets hurt, and worst case scenario, someone gets killed. And years ago, we didn't have that. You talked about somebody, you duked it out, and that was the end of it. And, next semester or whatever, you probably wind up being friends. It's a different world now. Things are very, very different than they were in past years or decades. Folks are not as personable as they used to be. They don't connect as well as they used to. They don't talk as much as they used to. Youngsters are sitting next to each other, and they're texting each other back and forth. They don't have necessarily a lot of conversation on the phones. We love to talk on the phone. When I was a youngster, you forget your girlfriend, you get on the phone, you talk for hours, and sometimes you just got on the phone and didn't say anything. Saying, "Oh, you gonna hang up?" "No, I'm gonna hang up. You hang up." Those days are gone. Youngsters don't talk on the phone like they used to. They're influenced by the visual things that they see, and they get to a point where they want to have those things and not necessarily put in the work to get those things. And if they put in the work, it's a negative type of work where they're committing crimes or they're doing things that are unlawful. So we have to figure out a way to combat these things so that we can get back on point of where we need to be in supporting our youngsters, but also putting the resources back into the communities that are going to allow these youngsters and people in general, and families. I don't want to not mention the families, because if we don't address the needs of the families, we're not addressing the needs of these youngsters who are committing these heinous crimes. We have to understand that there are a lot of single parent homes, whether it be a mother or whether it be a father. In a lot of instances, it's grandparents or even great grandparents who are now put in a position to raise or rear these youngsters, and they're tired. They don't have the resources. They don't have the literacy levels to go out and seek things that will help the youngsters become productive citizens. And they're tired. They've worked, they've raised their children, they've raised, some instance, their grandchildren, now their great grandchildren, and they need some help. They need some assistance. They need some hand holding so someone can walk them through the process and allow them to feel comfortable enough to ask dumb questions, because there are no dumb questions. and not feel that they're inferior or disrespected or that they're not going to get a result. I think that's a lot of the issue, that we don't embrace the family, we don't embrace those who are the caregivers to a lot of our folks. So now we have an instance where youngsters are kind of raising themselves in some degree because the technology has probably overtaken some of the people in the household who have not been exposed due to economics, due to surroundings, due to their inferiority complex or things of that nature, or just their lack of exposure. So they don't know how to get on the internet and research things. They don't know how to research. They don't know that they can go to various places and get the resources or get the assistance they need to attend to the needs of themselves as well as their families. Now, again, I always mention the analogy of being on an airplane, and when that flight attendant comes out and gives that speech that no one listens to, they say if the cabin loses pressure, the oxygen mask will come down. You are to put that oxygen mask on yourself first, because if you don't, the people that you're entrusted to assist, whether it be youngsters, babies, or elderly people or disabled folks, will perish because you'll be so busy fumbling to put that mask on them that you will lose consciousness. And then both of you, or you and the person that you're entrusted to aid, will perish. So it's important that we aid the people that are giving the help or giving the assistance or entrusted to be the caregivers, as well as those who are entrusted to oversee our youngsters. We give them the resources, we afford them the resources. You know, we have to take care of those who are less fortunate than us. That's what America is all about. That's what America was built on. Even though America is going through its challenges, they're still the best bet out there. You go to some of these other countries, you appreciate what you have in America, but we're getting to the point where the common folks who America is supposed to be all about are being left behind. The various programs that were once a staple in our communities that were aiding youngsters, clubs and organizations and activities, summer jobs, after school jobs, the old CETA jobs, the workforce jobs that you got as part of your school, where you were allowed to go and work in a certain industry, which was in coalition to your major in high school. Various shop programs where you actually were able to participate in some type of activity or some type of vocation, which allowed you to pursue a career. As we know, a lot of folks, some folks are not going to go to college. Some folks are not designed for college. Some don't want to go, but some will take a chance and do a small program and hopefully be put in a place where they can gain gainful employment through those programs. Those programs are pretty much non-existent in the communities anymore. And it's very, very important that we talk to our legislators, those who are in power positions, those who are in positions of leadership, to say we need to have these things put back into the community. We need to have community centers. We need to have community centers as safe havens. We need to have tutorial programs and things of that nature. And it needs to be exposed and advertised. And it needs to be in a place where those of us who need the assistance get the assistance. And that's very, very, very important. I know I jumped off a topic a little bit, but I think it all kind of goes together. If we don't have those resources, if we don't garner those things that are going to be important for us to sustain, and I do mean sustain, the livelihood of our youngsters, we're going to lose in the long run. We're going to have a generation, as they say, of youngsters that are less literate than the generation before. It was always the case where you wanted the next generation to do better than you, to make you look better by them doing better. And now we look at generations where we tend to be going backwards. And so we have to support the families. We have to support the caregivers. We have to put the resources in place in our community that are going to allow us to make productive citizens. And it starts in the preschools. It starts with dedicated teachers. And I'm a proponent of teachers. I think teachers need to be paid what teachers need to be paid. That's the bottom line. You know, teachers are the first outside of the household, the first entity that allows a child to explore, that uses their brain powers, their creativeness, their intellect and things of that nature. So I think it's very important that we support the teachers and we give the teachers what they need, and teachers need to be paid what they deserve to be paid. I'm a strong proponent of giving the educators the resources and the opportunities that they are so entitled to. Now you have a few that are not good teachers, but I think that's the minority. I think the majority of the teachers got into that business because they, number one, care about children, but they also, number two, care about what happens to children, and they want to make a difference, and they have a genuine love and compassion for teaching and taking someone to the next level. So it's very important that we support our teachers, and we also support those resources that we need to ensure that our teachers are given what they need to be given, so that they're not sitting in their classroom worried about paying their bills, worried about their pensions, worried about what they're going to do in the future when they hang up their boots and decide to go into the private sector or go into a retirement situation and not have the resources they need to sustain themselves. So it's very important that we support, number one, the resources in the communities, the things that are needed to to help families first and foremost, which will enhance the lives of our children and the lives of our mothers and the lives of our babies and the lives of our families, and definitely in the lives of our community as a whole. We also need to expose those resources so that folks our time get or understanding those resources, or even being exposed to those resources, or even being able to get to those resources. Because there's nothing worse than having a whole bunch of water and you can't get to it and you're thirsty. That defeats the purpose. So we have to make some creeks and some rivers and some streams into the communities that would allow our people in our communities to be able to get a hold of those resources and those things that are going to help them take themselves to the next level. I do believe, and it's in my strong opinion, that folks will rise to the occasion if you put them in a position to do those things. If you give them that authority to tell them, hey, you're responsible for you. I'm going to give you everything you need. I'm going to support you. I'm going to hold your hand. I'm going to walk you through these processes. And when you feel like you can't go on, I'm going to be there for you. And when you feel like you don't understand it, I'm going to explain it to you until you get it. And if we have to go over it a million times, my goal is not how quick you get it, is that you get it and that you understand it, so that now you're not somebody that's waiting to be served fish. You're learning how to fish, and you're learning how to be self-sustaining, and then that's going to help the community. You become a homeowner, you become a landowner, you become a person that has a bank account. You're giving into the system, because if we got all these folks not working, who's paying the taxes? A handful of us. And that's not fair to the vast majority. So we have a responsibility, and we also have a self-sustaining part to that too. The more folks we work, the more that they can put into the national debt, and we can get those things down, and folks can get back to work, and the taxes may go down, and the income tax, the real tax, all those things that tend to bog us down can be minimized, because now we got a working society that is now doing the things that they need to do in order to take us to the next level. Now I want to jump back into the violence thing, because I don't want to get off the air today and not talk about some of the things that we see. Again, I'm going to go back to some statistics. And this is an interesting one, multi-victim shootings in 2016. So we're going to go with multi-victim shootings in 2016. Now the number of victims. So if you take 5 shot, we're talking about instances. There were 8 occurrences of 5 people being shot in one situation. And out of those, 5 were killed. In the instance where there were 4 people shot in one instance, there were 15 occurrences of 4 people in the same occurrence being shot, and 5 of those perished. 3, there were 56 incidents of 3 people being shot, and in that 23 of those 56 incidents, 23 people were killed rather. And then when there were 2 people shot in a particular instance or occurrence, 248 instances of 2 people being shot. And out of that, 67 people perished. Those numbers are staggering. Those numbers are not acceptable. 5 people in one time being killed, 8 times, 8 separate times. There were 5 people that were involved in shootings, and 5 people in that particular set of incidents died. Those numbers are remarkable. They're remarkable. Let's go back to some of the factors. I want to go into the cost factor because I think sometimes if you expose the financial part of it, it allows people to look at it in a different way. For the month of the average cost of taking care of a gun victim, a shooting victim, is $55,000. That's the cost of the ER and the hospital expenses. $1,000 for the ambulance ride. $800 for homicide-related autopsies. This is not including hospice care or any kind of ongoing rehab. So we look at those numbers: $55,000 for a shooting victim in the hospital and the ER. $1,000, and this is average cost. This is not specific to one case, but this is the average. So if you take all of the victims and you average it out, these are the numbers that were provided by some of the websites that we looked at. $55,000. $1,000 for a ride from wherever you are to the hospital. Now, that was just for 80% of the victims, of the shooting victims. The other victims are those who drive themselves. So about 20% of people possibly transport themselves to seek medical attention. Now, I'm going to close on this a little bit, and then I'll throw some of my thoughts in. I just want to look at Chicago, just Chicago, as it relates to the years. We're going to start back with the original mayor, Daley, Richard J. Daley. He was in office from 1955 to 1976. And during the course of that time, that's a 21-year span, there were 10,910 homicides. After he died in office, then Mayor Michael Belander came in office, and he was in office from 1976 to 1979, 3-year time, give or take, 2,408 homicides. Jane Byrne, the first female mayor of Chicago, and first and only at this point, from 1979 to 1983, which is roughly a 4-year span, 3,202 homicides. The late, great Harold Washington, 1983 to 1987, which is 4 years plus, 3,295 homicides. Eugene Sawyer, who came into office right after Harold Washington passed, he was only in office for about 1.5 to 2 years, 1987 and 1989, 978 homicides. The second mayor, Daley, Richard M. Daley, who was our longest serving mayor, he was in office for 22 years, beginning in 1989 to 2011. There were 14,653 homicides. Now there's a plus or minus ratio in there, so it depends on which reporting entity you go into, but you can get the idea of where these numbers are. And our current mayor of Chicago, Rahm Emanuel, who's been in office roughly 5 years, starting in 2011, 2,208 homicides. And if you look at the trend, you find out that there is no trend. Homicides have been going on in Chicago for quite a while, and long before the original Mayor Daley got here. I did some research and looked at some numbers back in during Prohibition time and during the Great Depression time, and those numbers were staggering, obviously because of the influx of the crime outfits, or those guys, the Al Capone days and things like that, where those was like the Wild Wild West. Well, I'm here to tell you right now, we're in the wild, wild west now. We are in those same situations. We're in those same kind of mindsets that human life has no value to some people. And it's only a handful of people, but they're the ones that are driving the media. They're the ones that are driving the attention. They're the ones that are driving the fear. They're the ones that are driving these instances where people just don't feel comfortable. Folks are fleeing Chicago. Folks don't want to come back to Chicago. Young man that we mentioned earlier, who was the son of police officer, I believe R. Shell Dennis III, comes home to visit his mom, who is ailing, and his life is taken away from him. Again, Wade's cousin, walking her baby, just got through registering her children for school. Her life was taken. Those children will never be the same. Then on the flip side, we look at the Laquan McDonald case. We look at the young man who I can't recall his name. Please forgive me. We look at his instance where he was shot and his life was taken. Granted, he was not according to video and according to reports, doing the right thing, but he was a victim. We look at the various racial groups, ethnic groups. We look at the type of violent crimes, the shootings, the stabbings, the trauma, the arson, the assaults, the child abuse, and auto-related things. We look at gender. There's a big disparity between male and female violent crimes. We looked at males are 445 to 43 killed, and we look at the wounded, 2,147 versus 276. What does that tell us? You determine what that tells us. There's a lesson in these statistics. I think we need to look at what we're doing, why there's such a disparity in the racial, the gender, the cause of death, the victims, the communities, the cost factor, the administrative leadership at the time of these various violent crimes. All of that needs to take place, and all of that needs to be taken in consideration as we have these summits, as we have these meetings, as we come together. These are some things that we cannot overlook. These are some things that we have to take in serious consideration, because if we're going to do something about this, we got to make sure that we do the right thing at the right time. Well, that's about all the time I have today, guys. I appreciate you listening. You've been in tune to Common Talk here with J-Jack at Intellectual Radio. We thank you and take these things into consideration. We'll see you next time. We're out.